Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are on this beautiful planet. Welcome to TCTV, your global news channel. It's all kicking off in British politics. The British Parliament and the British state are in turmoil. As you guys remember, a couple of days ago, we discussed the initial news update that came out about the Afghan leak. This goes back to the fall of Afghanistan and the British government. Initially, obviously, the British Parliament announced with the government that we would be offering a number of Afghans to move to the UK as asylum seekers. But things escalated. What's happened since? Apart from what they said publicly, there was a secret scheme that they had to do because of a leak. Over the last couple of days, the mainstream media, at least in the UK, have not actually been telling you the truth. And that's the biggest problem. Mostly because due to their own regulations, they have a problem where they can't actually, well, maybe they're not able to do investigative work. But thanks to our 2CTV team, we're going to give you guys the information, the revelations that actually the mainstream media is ignoring or have failed to disclose. First things first, let's talk about the overall issue that we discussed a couple of days ago. Obviously, Britain secretly offered asylum to nearly 24,000 Afghans and also their families because they were caught up in an extremely insane data breach. Now, the leak led the British government to earmark £7 billion, £7 billion to relocate the Afghans to the UK. The problem with this is that they kept it a secret. The other problem with that was that the timing of this, and since yesterday, in the last couple of days, the political parties and politicians are pointing finger at each other, okay? What we are going to be exposing here is all the parties that are responsible, and no pun intended, I'm not talking about just political parties. Everybody including the Tory party, civil service, the Labour Party, and all those in Parliament who had a role, not just random MPs. Because most of the blame will go back to the British state, not necessarily parliamentarians. And the mainstream media is not talking about that. And that is a big issue. Following this, the Home Office, obviously this was actually done secretly by the Minister of Defence. The Home Office that is in charge of migration, they actually tried to stop this £7 billion plan to grant asylum to the 24,000 Afghans, because obviously they said there was a massive national security issue here. Even the Home Office. But the decision came from the defence, obviously Ben Wallace's team on the left, and also then Grant Shapps followed when he took his job as a defence secretary. The problem with this, following the people who made that decision, the leak happens, then there was an injunction, right? Look at the numbers first. Now, it's now crossed over 30,000, right? The resettled Afghans. It's going to go up, generally speaking. Mass migration is happening anyway. On Tuesday, a couple of days ago, a High Court judge lifted a super injunction that was in place to prevent anybody from talking about this, from reporting, those who knew, and the media, which was about 2 years. The reason nobody talked about this was because of the super injunction. Now, this is where idiots who don't understand parliamentary privilege started typing on their keyboards. People like Zia Youssef. Remember Zia Youssef? Mohammed Ziauddin Youssef of Reform UK? Then we're going to expose them as well. Because the primary blame goes to, firstly, those who leaked it and those in the civil service who basically pushed for the cover-up. Second blame goes on the Tory ministers, specifically defence, not even the Home Office, who basically went along with it, saying, sure, yeah, we don't know what you're talking about, but let's do it anyway. They betrayed it. And the Prime Minister, let's not forget, Boris Johnson. Then the Labour government over the last year. The Labour are now going to be in bigger trouble because even though technically that goes to the fault of the previous government, the issue of how they've handled this is becoming a big problem, yet the mainstream media is not talking about it. But this is the important part. James Heappey on the left, as defence minister at the time, was the one who single-handedly ran through this secret resettlement scheme. Grant Shapps on the right was his boss as defense secretary and obviously knew what was going on. These were the ones primarily responsible for essentially listening to stupid civil servants who pushed for the cover-up. Zia Yusuf, who started this crusade over the last couple of days, has not been attacking these guys. He's been attacking the Tories, right? Zia Yusuf and Reform UK started doing party politics. Obviously blame the Tories, we get it. The problem here, Zia Yusuf said this. The British government learned of the data leak in August 2023. There's going to be a lot of issues with this statement, by the way. 24,000 Afghans secretly granted asylum. The government covered it up. True. Who was in government? And apparently only 2 people were in government, according to Zia Yusuf. Suella Braverman and Robert Jenrick. Now, the supporters of Mohammed Ziauddin Yusuf obviously believe whatever this idiot says. And Reform UK. They're like, only 2 people were running the government. Nobody else. Problem, the idiocy of this statement is he got the timing wrong. Obviously, he lied. Mohammed lied because that post is not true. He is stupid. The truth is, Suella Braverman and Robert Jenrick were not around at that point. Suella Braverman was forced out of government on the 13th of November. Jenrick on the 7th of December. Both left. At the time, when they left the government, all they knew was that there had been a massive leak, without any information, obviously. A super injunction was obviously had already been approved, and the government was considering a range of options. That's the only information that these parliamentarians had at the time. The decision to approve this didn't take place until the 19th of December, so not August, as Zia Yusuf would say. Neither of these two knew about the details or anything. They just knew that there's a super injunction about some issue, there's some sort of leak, that's it. And this is not really me defending these two because they were still part of the previous Tory government that made a lot of mess. But they left at that point anyway. The fact that Zia Yusuf primarily targeted these two instead of James Heappey and Grant Shapps or even Ben Wallace or Boris Johnson, why? Because these two are a direct opponent right now to Reform UK. The hypocrisy of the political class is here. Labour are attacking all members of the Tory party because the Tories were in power. The Tories are basically saying that, I didn't do it, the other one did it. Reform are primarily targeting 2 Tories because they are direct opponents. They're all stupid. Everybody has their own agenda. The stupid Tories, the idiotic Labour, and the opportunistic Reform UK. The facts are that Reform UK have not criticised Labour once about this scheme. Why should you blame Labour? Well, they inherited the scheme. They kept the information longer than expected. They also expanded it last October. This was a political decision by Keir Starmer. Instead, of course, they're just blaming just 2 former Tory ministers who were not even in government at the time of that decision. They weren't even involved. Why not even at least attack Labour? Because political rivalry. But they're all as bad as each other, by the way. Because in 2021, 2022, all these politicians, inside and outside the tent, were very much on board with the idea of granting asylum to all the Afghans. They just bring them all. The fall of Afghanistan, right? All of them. So I'm now going to attack all the Tory, Labour, Reform UK ones. Well, they weren't Reform at the time, but let's start with this. Reform UK attacked Jenrick because Jenrick, at the time of the fall of Afghanistan, said welcoming Afghan refugees is a national project. So Reform UK decided to use this against Jenrick. Cool. That means that Reform UK are confident enough that they've always, the senior members of Reform have always been on the other side of Robert Jenrick. But that's not true. Because Jenrick himself replied, Richard Tice also thought it was a good idea. Tice said in 2021, we must protect those brave Afghans who helped us and their families by settling them in the UK. Simple. No ifs, no buts. It doesn't stop here. Because the issue is, if you had that position, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, right? That's your position. Now they're all changing their minds. Now they're all suddenly against it. Nigel Farage said that we could allow even more Syrians to move to Britain. And he said, I don't see that as a problem. He said that on LBC.
We already accept refugees and asylum seekers every year. There were 25,000 applications for asylum in Britain last year. There were more than that the year before. Actually, without changing the numbers at all, we can allow more Syrians to come to Britain. I don't see that as a problem.
I don't see that as a problem. If right now Angela Rayner would say the exact same thing, all of them, including Kemi Badenoch as Tory leader, Nigel Farage as Reform leader, they're all going to be destroying Angela Rayner for saying the exact same thing. Don't listen to the political parties on this. Political class, they all have their own agenda. And the system wants you to attack, if you support this party, you should attack that party. Because the reality is, focus on the real enemy. The deep state, civil service, those who were responsible for the actual leak, and those who were actually responsible for the cover-up. Civil servants go to stupid government ministers and say, here's a piece of paper, we have this solution, just sign it. And ministers are a bunch of puppets. And they just say, okay. Obviously, when something goes wrong, that minister will be thrown under the bus. They are still the decision makers, so it's their fault. But who influenced them? The unelected bureaucrats. Nobody, even in the media, are focusing on that. And nobody in the media are focusing on the Prime Minister at the time, Boris Johnson. Nobody in the media are focusing on Labour and Keir Starmer as Prime Minister, who last year had an opportunity to fix this, but didn't. The whole thing is falling apart. See? Even the studio is angry at this. I don't know what happened. Anyway, before the whole building comes down on me, like that the Iranian state TV presenter when she was shouting and the rockets came down, let's quickly get some reaction from you guys in the live chat. We've got Danny in the super chat saying, what is this? I live overlooking one of the camps where those leaked Afghans are. It's been a local secret. Yeah. Someone said ghosts. Actually, let me just get some reactions to this. I don't know what happened, but the timing of it was good, actually. Someone said, what timing? Crazy times. What is this going on with you guys? Salah says, notice the way 2C won't promote protests. Won't see 2C at the Dover this Saturday. No, you won't see me at Dover. And no, we don't promote protests on the news channel of 2C TV. Of course we don't. Let's see what else we have. Even my good friend, close friend, Nick Tanconi, the leader of UKIP, when he organises a lot of protests, we don't promote his protests. You know, he's still my friend, and I obviously we've been to some to report and cover, but that's it. Now, Reform no different to Tories and Labour. But I mean, considering that most of these people were formerly from the other parties, they're all the same. They just have different colours and different brandings. That's basically the main difference. Let's get the more super chats. Maya, I saw on Talk TV, why would you do that? And by others today, that the Afghans are now suing for £1 billion. Yeah, that's going to be the compensation cost for the leaked documents. Yeah, so that's the potential compensation fee that the British taxpayer will have to now pay. So everything's just getting worse and worse. And again, there hasn't been any proper investigation launched into the actual state, the British state that is responsible for this. For the rest of time, you can continue to throw ministers under the bus. That's not really going to achieve anything. Firstly, the former ministers, they're all left anyway. Even if you just get emotional and say, send them to jail. Send them to jail. Nothing's going to happen. They're just going to be in prison. What about the next one? What about the next one? Because it's not even about the ministers. It's not even about Boris Johnson. It's not even about Keir Starmer. Because I criticised Keir Starmer last year. He had the chance he also made it worse. He expanded this. Unless you address the real enemy, the real cancer, that is those in the state, the deep state of Britain, the faceless bureaucrats. They continue to do the same thing. And they blame it on ministers. As I said, obviously ministers at the end of the day are the decision makers. They have to be held accountable. I'm not saying don't even criticize the ministers. Obviously, still throw them on the bus, but that's not the only solution. You have to actually find the faceless bureaucrats and obviously get rid of them, but reform the system. Europe will be an interesting case of how a continent can be invaded without a single war. Yes, and it's a gradual move, which is still taking place. It's not finished yet, and the actual result will be seen within the next 50 years. And that those who are going to say, "Oh, I can already see it. It's already chaotic." This is just the beginning. The full result of the change of identity and culture and the rule of law will be seen in about 50 years' time. Because the new generation of, obviously, those with different cultures, when they, obviously, most of their kids will grow up and most of them will become politicians. And legally and democratically, they can change all the constitutions and all the legislations. That they have a different way of life, and people, the Anglo-Saxons initially in England, had a different way of life. That way of life is going to change because of the demographic change. Unless you make a radical decision now, nothing's going to change in terms of stopping that shift. It's time for a new generation of leaders in a new remigration party with no compromise by old mistakes. The issue again with this is that that's just one single issue. It's a very big single issue, the migration, mass migration, everything else. But you could still, for example, we had leaders in Britain like Tony Benn, like Clement Atley, former Labour Prime Minister. These guys were patriotic. They were, obviously, Atley was pro-empire. He was a nationalist. But he was also a communist. He was a massive socialist. So you can be like, okay, so we can vote for Clement Atley. He's a nationalist. But what is it going to do with the rest of the policies for the country? Chaos. High taxes, nationalization of everything, and control by the state. Mussolini was a nationalist, but his policies was chaotic because it was all state control. So obviously, big single issues like migration and border crisis is very important. Right now it's an imminent crisis. But if you want to vote for any sort of leader or any sort of candidate, you have to ensure that the rest of their policies is also spot on. Otherwise, you can't vote for someone who says, let's just ban everybody and close the borders. Okay, what next? And then we're just going to have the state controlling your life. That's not good. You have to make sure that the rest of the policies is also pro-freedom and pro-liberty. But yeah, Bumban has come back to see you. The ghost of Bumban. Yeah, because he's still... Where is his ashes? Oh, he's over there. Bumban used to be the TCTV house bunny. Someone said, I'm leaving, going Vietnam. Bye. Let's invade Vietnam instead. We are seeing governments all over the world bring in so-called refugees from the worst countries. It says certain something seems to be an orchestrated movement. Is this globalists destabilizing it? No, it's the globalists just going with their way of life and the way they see the world. They see that in their interests, because of their worldview, for the Western developed countries to become a mix of all different cultures, even if that means those cultures are not compatible, because that means that the developed countries, like, for example, Canada or France, will no longer have one strong identity. And they see it as a good thing, because at the end of the day, if you live in a corporatist globalist world, you won't even need a dictatorial government. You will just have the globalized corporations running your life. You'll be dependent on them like an addiction. And obviously a centralized planning system will be in place to just treat everybody as a client, as a stakeholder, instead of actually a citizen of the country with the pride of the flag. People who live as residents in those countries will just be treated as customers. Okay, so we're going to give you this, we're going to look after you, but you have to say yes to this. They basically want everybody to just be a number as part of a bigger machine, because they just like that managerial world. They find it easier to control because they are control freaks. They have a very different worldview to more traditional conservative-minded in the West, who are mostly from smaller towns or countryside. It's just a clash of worldviews, obviously. The globalist side will see the nationalist side as scary and dangerous. They say, oh, you're going to lead to Mussolini. And obviously the nationalist side will see the globalists as dangerous because they say you're changing our way of life, you want to control us. Obviously, I'm on more of the nationalist side, so I see the globalists as dangerous, but they would see me as dangerous. It's just your different worldview. I still think we're right, but a couple of more super chats here as well. And this year's needs a restructuring and accountability, civil service. Let's get some reaction from the members of TCTV Plus quickly. Pete says, we need to stop being around let's get Labour and Stasi Starmer out, not just the government, but the UK. Deport them to Gaza, probably. I made this for you today. Thanks for this. Okay, let's get some more actual comments. Pork says this is a complete clown show. It's embarrassing. You brought a ghost home from the castle. Oh, yeah. Okay, now I'm going to think I'm haunted. So we went to this wedding in Durham last week, a couple of weeks ago, and we stayed at this haunted castle. I was convinced it was a ghost, so I think the ghost is following me now. What was the IDF targeting your studio? Okay, I'm getting bullied by the members of TCTV Plus. Thanks, guys. And there will definitely be civil unrest coming. It's not even a question at this point. So yeah, people have been saying that since the 90s. Still waiting for that as well. Someone said it's as if Parliament wants to be taken over. Yeah, essentially. Anyway, there's a lot to focus on. As I said, these are the parts of the reports that the mainstream media are not telling you, and they're not focusing on the real actual issues and who to really blame, and not just to shift the blame based on political parties. But obviously, prime ministers like Boris Johnson need to be held accountable for being stupid enough to listen to those civil servants, and obviously those like James Heapy, Grant Shapps, Ben Wallace. All of them need to be held accountable, but the full investigation is needed. For now, make sure to download the 2CTV app, the home of geopolitical news, for free to get access to all our news alerts. But obviously, if you want to also become a member of 2CTV Plus to get access to our documentaries and everything else, make sure to go on 2c.tv. You'll get 1 month free if you join as an annual subscriber today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Maya 2C, and we are the media.